This happened in less than one day. Max Verstappen jumped into a Mercedes GT3 at the most dangerous track in the world, with zero real experience in that category, and within hours, he was faster than drivers who have spent years there. Not competitive. Faster. By almost 2 seconds. On a 20-kilometer circuit where one mistake ends everything. And that's not even the part that shocked Formula One. Because what really exposed everything was how easily he adapted. Different car. Different physics. Different systems. And yet, he looked more comfortable than he does in his own Formula One car. Think about that. The best driver in the world, adapting instantly to a completely new machine, but struggling with the one he's supposed to master. Stay until the end, because the final detail explains why this changes everything. Subscribe now, or you're going to miss what comes next. But here's where the story becomes even more unsettling. Because this wasn't the first time. This level of adaptation didn't start at the Nurburgring. It actually started months earlier, when almost nobody was paying attention. Back when Verstappen quietly stepped into a GT3 car for the very first time. Different team, different manufacturer, different everything. And still, the result was immediate. He won on debut. Not after a learning phase. Not after building confidence. Straight away. And that detail changes how you should see this entire Nürburgring test. Because now it's no longer surprising. It's a pattern. A repeated behavior. Put him in something new, and he doesn't adapt slowly. He resets instantly. That's the difference. Most drivers carry habits from one category to another. They need laps to adjust. They need time to understand limits. Verstappen does something else. He reads the car. Almost immediately. Weight transfer. Grip levels. Braking response. And then, he rewrites his driving around it. That's why the Nürburgring looked so natural for him. Not because it was easy, but because his process is faster than everyone else's. And here's where things take another turn. Because for this project, he didn't just pick any car. He chose Mercedes. That decision matters more than it seems. A Red Bull driver. Choosing Mercedes machinery outside Formula One. That's not random. That's not coincidence. That's exposure. Because while he struggles with complexity in Formula One, he steps into a Mercedes GT3. And everything becomes simple again. No hybrid system. No energy deployment. No artificial limitations. Just driving. And the moment that simplicity returns, so does his performance. But this is where it gets even more revealing. Because during those so-called secret tests, people noticed something subtle. Something easy to miss if you're only looking at lap times. His confidence grew, almost instantly. Not after dozens of laps. After just a few. Flat out through sections like floodplats. Committed through corners that punish hesitation. And completely in control of a car he barely knew. That is not normal. That is not expected. And that's exactly why people inside the paddock started paying attention. Because this wasn't just about speed. It was about how quickly he reached that speed. And once you understand that, you start to see the real implication. If he can adapt this fast, anywhere, then the one place where he struggles becomes impossible to ignore. And that place is Formula One. And this is where the story stops being about adaptation and starts becoming about exposure. Because now the comparison is unavoidable. On one side, a brand new car. A completely different category. One of the hardest circuits in the world. And he looks comfortable, confident, in control. On the other side, the car he knows better than anyone. The category he has dominated for years. And suddenly, everything looks difficult. That contrast is too big to ignore. Because adaptation is supposed to work the other way around. You struggle in something new. And you dominate what you already know. But here, it's reversed. And that's what exposed the real issue. Because this is not about skill. We already know he has that. This is not about experience. He has more than enough. This is about feeling. And that's where everything breaks. Because in Formula One right now, drivers are not just driving. They are managing. Managing energy. Managing systems. Managing limitations that change every lap. And for a driver like Verstappen, that creates a disconnect between what he wants the car to do and what the car actually allows him to do. But at the Nürburgring, that disconnect disappears. No hybrid system. No unpredictable deployment. No layers between input and response. Just throttle, brake, steering, immediate feedback. And suddenly, everything aligns again. That's why the adaptation looked instant. Because it wasn't really adaptation. It was recognition. Recognition of something familiar. Something natural. Something he's been missing. And this is where the situation becomes uncomfortable for Formula One. Because you cannot teach that feeling. You cannot simulate it with software. You cannot recreate it with more complexity. In fact, complexity is the problem. And Verstappen just proved it, without saying it directly. By stepping into a simpler car? And performing better, faster, and more naturally. But here's the part that changes everything. Because once a driver realizes this, it doesn't go away. You can't unfeel it. You can't ignore it. Every time you go back to the Formula One car, you notice the difference even more. Every corner feels less pure. Every lap feels more controlled, but less connected. And that slowly builds something dangerous. Frustration. Not explosive. Not visible at first. But constant. And that's exactly what we've been seeing. Short radio messages. Subtle comments. Small signs that something isn't right. And now, after Nurburgring, those signs have context. Because now we know what he's comparing it to. And once that comparison exists, the next step becomes inevitable. Because the real question is no longer, can he adapt to Formula One? We already know he can. The real question is, does he still want to? And that question is where everything finally comes to a head. Because wanting to stay and choosing to stay are not the same thing. And right now, those two things are starting to separate. Slowly, quietly, but very clearly. Because after everything we've seen, the adaptation, the Nurburgring, the performance, there's one detail that changes the entire meaning of this story. He didn't just drive the car. He enjoyed it. That might sound simple. But at this level, it's everything. Because drivers like Verstappen don't chase results. They chase feeling. That connection between car and driver that cannot be measured on a timing screen. And when that connection is there, everything flows. Confidence. Precision. Consistency. But when it's missing, even the fastest driver in the world starts to look limited. And that's exactly the contrast we're seeing. At the Nurburgring, he steps out of the car smiling, talking about how every lap teaches him something, how the experience feels pure, how it reminds him why he loves racing. Then he goes back to Formula One, and that feeling disappears. That difference is not small. It's fundamental. Because once a driver reconnects with that emotion, it resets their expectations completely. What used to feel acceptable now feels compromised. What used to feel fast now feels restricted. And that creates a gap, not in performance, in motivation. And this is where things become irreversible. Because motivation at this level is everything. You cannot fake it. You cannot force it. And once it starts fading, no contract, no team, no championship can fully replace it. So now, everything we've seen points to one final reality. The Nurburgring didn't just expose his adaptation. It exposed his standard. What he expects from a car. What he needs to feel competitive. What he needs to feel alive behind the wheel. And Formula One, right now, is not meeting that standard. That's the real story. Not that he adapted quickly. Not that he was faster. But that he found something that he might not be willing to give up again. And if that's true, then the biggest question in Formula One is no longer about performance. It's about choice. Because when the best driver in the world realizes, he feels better outside the sport than inside it, the decision is no longer about adapting. It's about leaving. And if that's where this is heading, then what we witnessed at the Nurburgring was not just revealing. It was a warning. A very clear one. Because Formula One has always believed something fundamental. That the best drivers will always stay. That the pinnacle of motorsport is enough. That no matter how complex the cars become, the prestige will keep them there. But what happens when that stops being true? What happens when the feeling of driving becomes more valuable than the status of winning? That's the shift nobody was prepared for. Because Verstappen is not chasing history anymore. He already has it. He is not chasing validation. He doesn't need it. So what's left? Only one thing. Enjoyment. And that's exactly what he found outside Formula One. At the Nurburgring. In a Mercedes GT3. On a track where there are no shortcuts. No artificial advantages. No systems masking limitations. Just pure driving. And that purity exposed everything. It exposed how quickly he can adapt. It exposed how naturally he can dominate. But more importantly, it exposed what he's been missing. And once that becomes clear, everything else starts to feel secondary. Championships, contracts, even legacy. Because none of that replaces the feeling he described. That connection. That simplicity. That control. And now, Formula One has a problem. Not a technical problem. Not a competitive problem. A philosophical one. Because if the sport continues in this direction, It risks losing the very thing that made drivers like Verstappen fall in love with it. And if it loses that, it doesn't matter how fast the cars are. It doesn't matter how advanced the technology becomes. Because the core of it is gone. So now, everything leads to one final realization. The Nurburgring didn't just expose Verstappen's adaptation. It exposed Formula One's vulnerability. Because for the first time in years, there is a real possibility that the best driver in the world has already experienced something better. And if that's true, then the real question is no longer whether he can adapt to Formula One. It's whether Formula One can adapt before it's too late.